I thought grief would be the hardest part of losing my father. I was wrong. What cut deeper than death was betrayal. Not from him, but from the brother I once trusted with my life. We were gathered in the old family sitting room, curtains drawn against the harsh afternoon sun. My mother sat stiffly on the edge of the sofa, her hands clasped so tightly around a handkerchief I thought it might tear. My brother lounged in the armchair across from me, too relaxed for a son who had just buried his father. And at the center of it all stood the lawyer, a thin man with steel-gray hair, clutching the document that would change everything. My father's will. I wasn't afraid. For as long as I could remember, Dad had promised fairness. He loved us equally, he always said. Whatever he had would be split between me and my brother, no room for envy, no reason for war. I clung to that promise like a rope in the storm of grief. The lawyer cleared his throat and began. His voice was careful, deliberate, each word like a stone dropping into still water. He read of debts to be settled, of minor possessions passed to distant relatives, of a foundation left in my mother's care. I nodded along, waiting for the part that mattered. And then it came. To my eldest son, Daniel, I leave the entirety of my estate, business holdings, and financial assets. The room tilted. My chest tightened. For a moment, I thought I had misheard, but the lawyer kept going, the words cruel and final. This is my last will and testament, signed and witnessed. Silence followed, heavy, unnatural. I turned to my brother. He wasn't shocked. His lips curled at the corner, the faintest smirk, like he had been waiting for this exact moment. "No," I whispered, that's not possible. Dad promised." The lawyer folded the paper and stepped back, eyes lowered. My mother pressed a trembling hand to her lips, tears sliding down her cheeks. She reached for me, her voice breaking. "Michael, please, don't let this tear you apart. Your father probably had his reasons." Reasons. The word burned. I looked at her, then at my brother. He met my gaze, calm, steady, almost daring me to question it. And in that instant, I knew this wasn't my father's will. Not truly. It was my brother's victory, carved out of fear and secrecy. The days that followed were a blur of anger and grief. I wandered through the house like a ghost, every corner reminder of promises broken. I replayed the will's words over and over until they fused with my nightmares. It was only weeks later, when the whispers began, that I understood what had happened. My father, the man who preached loyalty and faithfulness, had not been as pure as he seemed. Before marriage, even into it, there had been someone else. A woman, a hidden love he had carried in silence, tucked away where no one would look. There were letters, photographs, even receipts for the apartment he had quietly maintained for her. My brother had found them, tucked away in the back of Father's study, and he had used them. I imagined the confrontation, my father on his deathbed, weakened, desperate to leave behind a legacy untainted by scandal. My brother standing over him, letters in hand, voice steady and merciless. "Change the will, or I'll destroy your memory. Mother will know. Everyone will know." A dying man doesn't always choose justice. Sometimes he chooses silence. Sometimes shame is stronger than love. And so, my father signed. When I finally confronted my brother, it wasn't in rage, but in disbelief. I said, "You blackmails him?" My voice hoarse. "You forced him to do it?" Daniel leaned against the banister, arms folded, eyes cold. He said, "I didn't force him. I gave him a choice. Protect his reputation or cling to some fantasy of fairness. He made his decision." I stared at him, searching for remorse,
for some hint of the brother I once knew, but all I saw was hunger. I whispered, "You took everything." His lips curved into that same mocking smirk I'd seen after the will was read. "No, Michael, I earned it. You were too busy worshiping him to see the truth. I saw, I acted. That's the difference between us." My mother tried to keep us from war. She pleaded, wept, and begged me not to drag our father's memory through the courts. "Michael, please," she said one night, her hands clutching mine. "Your father made his choice. Let it be. Don't fight your brother. Don't let this destroy what little we have left." But I couldn't, not when I knew the truth, not when I saw how greed had twisted the man I once called brother. I hired a lawyer. The court battle was long, bitter, a parade of evidence and testimony that scraped raw the wounds of our family. My brother's defense was slick, polished. He painted me as jealous, ungrateful, clinging to promises my father had long abandoned. But the cracks appeared. Witnesses faltered. Medical records showed my father's decline at the time of the will's revision. And while the details of his secret love never saw daylight in court, the shadow of it hung heavy in every whispered exchange between attorneys. In the end, the judge saw the truth. The will had been signed under undue influence. It was overturned. The estate was divided equally, as my father had once promised. I should have felt victorious, but when I looked across the courtroom and saw my brother's eyes, cold, sharp, filled with a hatred that matched my own, I realized something had been lost forever. It's been months now. My share of the inheritance sits untouched in the bank. The house is quiet, too quiet, my mother moving through it like a ghost. She speaks of family dinners, of reconciliation, of hope that one day her sons might sit at the same table again. But I can't. I can't forget the smirk on my brother's face. I can't forgive the way he bent our father's dying hand. I can't look at him without seeing the man who traded blood for power. Sometimes in the silence of the night, I think about the secret he unearthed, about the woman who existed in the shadows of my father's life. I wonder if she knows the destruction her memory caused. I wonder if she was ever worth it. And sometimes I wonder if my father regretted it, signing away fairness, breaking his own promise, just to keep his shame buried. But then I remember the last thing he used to say again and again, as though repetition could make it true. "Family will outlast fortune." He was wrong, because in the end, it wasn't love or fairness that shaped our inheritance. It was a secret, and secrets, I've learned, outlive everything. In the end, I inherited more than land, houses, or bank accounts. I inherited the weight of a broken family, the silence of a mother caught between sons, and the truth that sometimes betrayal cuts deeper than death itself. The fortune is divided, but the damage remains whole.
What would you do if you stood where I did? Fight for the truth at the cost of family, or protect the family at the cost of justice?